Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of, yes, you guessed it, Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.1. Okay, so, and of course we're playing as Japan. You guys keep moving up here, you move to there. We're trying to save Iraq from a British attack. While Iraq is greedily attacking Iran, which it shouldn't be. Leave that to me. I want the oil. You don't need the oil. Not that I really desperately need it either. They're holding there. We're getting some more reinforcements coming. Okay, that looks like it's close enough to deal with some of the command structure down there. Now you guys come up and pick this up. We could use that infantry division. We need a bit more than I thought for Australia. Australia is fighting hard. Okay, I hear you on that. Yeah, and I didn't think it would be easy. Especially expanding it. I thought you could do it, but it'd be a little more practical, but still. Yeah, I'm believing you on that. For sure. Okay. No, I believe. And Port Moresby. Oh yeah, no, the Australians fought very well in World War II. The only thing that is sort of unhistorically reasonable is the size of the Australian army. Though, no, I wouldn't say the Japanese army is unhistorically large. You know, too big than what would be likely. Okay. There we go. Now. Yeah. I should have set them out sooner, just get distracted. Okay. Those guys. Hopefully we can just drop them in. Yes, okay. You come down here to pick up another division. We have another division coming now. They got a bunch of military police, which will be useful. Dropping in here at the moment, I guess. I don't know if this is the best place for them. I want to make sure we don't have any commanders in any of these military police units. I've come to the conclusion that Japan does have enough commanders to do this, but I don't want to take the time, and they're really not going to do much fighting to make it worth having a commander in. And there are no special partisan suppression commanders like the Germans have. And yeah, we'll have these guys. Don't know if I should send them down to Australia or not. The heavy AT regiments. You know, maybe one would do good. I don't know who we'd attach it to. Is he going? Yeah. No, we don't want to transport down here. We want to move, rebase down there. Under the right conditions, sure, the Japanese could have done it. If there wasn't American involvement in the war, and Japan wasn't having to fight too hard on other fronts, oh sure, it could have. And we've talked about this a little bit before. Australia was not a heavily industrialized country at the start of the war. It just wasn't. I'm not saying anything bad about Australia, it just was not industrialized. And so they had the fighting potential. They had one armaments factory already, I think already existing. I know it definitely comes into existence at this time, if it wasn't already. But it is a I still think to this day not a very high production armaments factory levels. Okay, that's interesting to know that it'd be easier with diesel. And basically nobody was using diesel during World War II for locomotives. I think there were just experimental locomotives, basically. Or whatever. I don't know if quite experimental, but very limited production, very limited use diesel. And I think most of them were sidelined in America that did exist during the war, just so they wouldn't use the more limited resources of diesel. Carrier damage control systems. Good. Good. And that's grayed out. We're going to come up to industry and do long-range aircraft production next. Yeah, you have Lithgow arms. I have an partially complete, I will say, L1A1A. That's an Australian manufactured battle rifle. The Commonwealth version of an FNFAL. So I have a late production version of the L1A1A. As some of you know who have been paying attention, I collect FNFALs, so, and their various types. Yeah, very interesting. I know Australia did a really neat job on their M113 armored personnel carriers. They basically cut them in half, I mean literally cutting them in half, and stretched them out one road wheel longer and welded them back up and did some other drive and other improvements to them, and I think they're using LAV type wheeled armored vehicles as well, and a few other stuff like that. I do sort of follow what's going with Australia in modern arms. Yeah, well, the Dutch used to be an imperial naval power, and so they have some of that tradition, but they're losing that capability as time goes on, I would say. I'm not saying they can't make small vessels, but do you guys have a cruiser, Arno? A real proper cruiser? You guys used to have ships of the line. Smallish ones, for sure, but ships of the line. Yeah, and that's a problem with Australia, that they don't do much naval stuff. Because you're an island, in essence. You're obviously a continent, but and the best place to protect it is at sea and not on land. Oh, I didn't know they sent any over as Lend-Lease. Yeah, destroyer types and subs, I'm not doubting that, but like I say, it used to be, well, sort of 60 gun ships of the line in the Napoleonic era. The Dutch were producing, so that they were real fighting ships. You know, you guys did well against the British a few times. Battle of Texel, I think is how it's pronounced, and a few other. Campers down, the British did win that, but that was a bit of a muddle on the British side. Okay, okay, that's right. We're going to add the DEs as escorts. There we go. So now that's a relatively well escorted unit. Let's see if we were to, no, we want to detach from that tank army way away. Let's see if we can go to the 8th Army and be in Range, no, we're not. Oh well. Let's give this guy a better commander. There we go. This will be a good commander for him, I guess. Okay, keep moving. They're all trying to retreat to British territory before Australia or Saudi Arabia gets into the war on the Axis side. Yep. Oh, sorry. Sorry, you're right about that. I did read that wrong. Just glancing up at things. Sorry about that. You leave it up to America, Tippett, and what happens when America isn't there? You know, I love Australia and want to support it, but we may elect a American president who's either Republican or Democrat, who's an isolationist, or just likes the enemy more than they like you. They might have during the 1700s or something. No, yeah, the 1600s maybe before that, but not in the 18th century. Maybe in the 17th century they did. So yeah, you look at Israel. Israel is a nation that knows that. Well, Jordan. Well, I don't know if Jordan would if they could. They would have if they could have in the past, but it's surrounded by enemies. So it relies upon America to support its defensive role. But it knows it can't rely upon America because under some presidents and things, refused arms delivery. So they've tried to diversify and come up with their own, and as well as do domestic production of almost everything they can. And so they are really learned the lessons that they got to be self-reliant on defending themselves. Sure, have allies, try to work with them, support them, have them support you, all that good stuff, but they're the ones that know that they aren't going to lose again. And they're going to do everything in their power to survive. Yeah, well, governments are short-sighted. Whether it's always stupid. Well, you shouldn't give it away. Maybe sell it, but not give away your natural resources. Okay, so long-range submarine classes have advanced. Very good. I was waiting for that. Mostly because, and we're going to come back to that, I wanted to get silent running drive. I don't really care about speed. I more want sea defense type things so that we're not as vulnerable to particularly the American capability of anti-submarine. I mean, look, I'm thinking, yeah, it's the Dutch. The Dutch were being stupid recently. I mean, in the last 10 or so years. They bought from Germany some really nice Panzerhaubützen 2000s. Those are the really nice. You can debate whether they or the Swedish fully automated guns are the best howitzers in the world, but the U.S. has the Excalibur prototype thing, which is really, really cool, but it's still just a prototype, and yeah. And super damn expensive because it's like, you know, America overspending on widgets and gadgets to put into a thing. But the Germans have their really nice artillery, and I think it's the best that's really practical and fielded in the world, artillery right now. And so they have this, and the Dutch bought a bunch of these things. Smartly, they bought a bunch. But I don't know, it was some number of years ago. I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago. I was hearing they were up for sale, or 2/3 of them were up for sale. The Dutch were going like, yeah, we don't need these howitzers anymore. Yeah. We're no longer fearing, you know, Soviet invasion thingy, and we really don't think the German government or the Belgian government or the Danish or the British government or even the Americans, because obviously the Americans can go anywhere in the world and invade anywhere in the world they want to, are really going to actually invade us. So we don't need any of these really nice, or we need a few. They're going to keep a few, but they're going to sell off these. These aren't like 1960s or even 1970s technology. These aren't like, you know, some old artillery systems that, you know, we just really don't really even want anymore. Now, I would still, it depends on how many you have, but I probably wouldn't even give up those, because I'm a militarist in the sense of at least defensive militarist, not necessarily an aggressive militarist, but wouldn't get rid of those even. But, you know, we're not talking about ancient technology or outdated technology. We're talking about current technology. Not that maybe there's new electronic, you know, aiming systems or coordination systems that they could be retrofitted with, but they were still some of the most modern, best artillery in the world that they were wanting to sell off secondhand. I mean, my God, people, the world can change. Things can change. Somebody can shoot down your Dutch airliner somewhere, and maybe nobody's going to do anything about it, and maybe you want to do something about it. Yeah, I don't know, and I don't get what's going on with them trying to do it. Let's see what Arno's response. You're depending too much on the U.S. for protection. Yep. But then Trump happened, and now we're finally getting more money for defense. And yeah, even more F-35s are being bought. Yeah. Trump isn't anti-NATO. Trump is anti-American paying for NATO, whether it's the America's share or more than America's share. And then, hey, yeah, we give free health care. We give free everything in our country. Yeah. But we don't have much money for defense. And so Trump is sort of like looking at that and going, really? Really? You mean we need to pay, we need to have our nuclear umbrella, which is expensive, and all of that stuff that you're sort of relying upon, that nobody's going to nuke the Netherlands or Belgium or Germany or wherever, because if they do, the U.S. will return nukem for us. And yeah, I don't want nuclear proliferation. I don't want every European country to have their own nukes. But so that's okay. But you're also looking at conventional weapons, because I'll tell you what, I would probably be a bad governmental leader. Because if I was in charge of the Netherlands after that Dutch flight that gets shot down by the Russians, you know what I would have done? I would have sent a Dutch training force to Ukraine that had some of those Panzerhaubitsen 2000s with their really good counter battery fire, their excellent counter battery fire capabilities, and move them over to the border and decide to do return fire training, live fire training on any of those artillery positions that are so-called rebels. We know they're Russian soldiers without their uniform, without the official Russian uniforms on. Volunteers, very likely, but they're still Russian soldiers, or Russian artillery positions that are firing into Ukrainian territory, and definitely fire on any Ukrainian, or any rebels inside of Ukrainian territory. Do live fire support, and have a few battalions of Dutch infantry and a few other professional trainers there, basically disguised combat troops. And I would have entered the situation in Ukraine over the downing of that flight. Wouldn't have invaded the Russia. Not saying go to war with Russia. Just cloak it in a training mission. Send them to Ukraine and have the live fire training. And oops, there's somebody out there shooting at us. We better return fire to protect our soldiers in our live fire training within Ukrainian boundaries. That's what I would have done. Straight up, I would have done that if I was the Netherlands. And I don't know what the freaking cowardice of your government is. I don't know if they're too afraid of their allies, the America, France, Britain, Germany, saying no, 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 we don't want to inflame the situation, or whether they're too afraid of their populace. Oh, well, we don't want to send our soldiers to fight in another war because Russia may do something bad to us. Well, you know, really, yeah, and you know, if you want peace, prepare for war. And if you have governments, because you don't have to necessarily keep them there that long, they don't have to, you have high Dutch casualty figures, but at least stick it out to the casualty figures who died on the airplane, you know, 100 or so dead or whatever it was, you know, and do some fighting to help show that, yeah, if you shoot our airplane down, we're actually going to do something about it that makes worth shooting our airplane down a thing not to do. And find a way to do that. You know, and I'd have to sort of look back on that, but when the Soviets shot down the American plane, you know, flight whatever that was flying into Korea or something, you know, way back in the 80s. Probably none of you remember this. I don't remember the flight. That's, you know, also prompted why we put so much military aid into supporting groups like the Afghan rebels. Sort of like, oh, you're shooting down our aircraft? Oh, well, our secret aid that everybody knows about to Afghanistan rebels that are fighting your Soviet troops just got more. Okay, well, I'll just call you Jaeger. Jaeger, well, since Russia is on the Security Council, they can veto any Security Council resolution, and since most of the members of the UN General Assembly want to stick it to Western countries, they aren't going to vote for it, so that isn't really going to matter. It just isn't. You know, dealing with China is the same way. The UN, I would really love to see Trump, at a minimum, stop all U.S. funding for the UN, at a maximum to kick out the organization out of the U.S. You know, they can move it back to The Hague, or they could move it to you know, somewhere in Switzerland or something else. The U.S. can still be a member of the Security Council, and I'm not saying withdraw from the UN. I'm just saying kick out the building from the U.S. and just say, bye-bye, find a new location, have fun wherever that is. But at least get out of funding them. Yeah, that would have been another good cloak of saying, yeah, we're coming in without any sort of declaration of war or thing that needs to spread to other nations. It's just simply we're doing something about this, but it's not. You know, you don't have to declare war just because you're entering a conflict, especially if you're inside of somebody's borders, or like you say, if they shoot down your flight and you want to secure the area. Okay, good. We keep taking down them. Good thing we got these guys out here on anti-submarine patrol. Okay, and they're here, and these guys are going to leave again so we don't over stress the supply system, which I'm already sort of worried about doing. And these guys can go back. Oh, they brought that. No, I don't know what they brought. They brought something earlier, I think. Okay, they can come back up to here. And these guys, which have been here too long. Well, this will be easier. Get on board ships. There we go. You're coming down to here. I think this is the best place, because this is going to threaten the victory points more coming this way. This is going to be more of a defensive battle here. And we have, I think, yes, these guys need to get on board. And come down here, I guess, rebase. How big of a port is this? Okay, reasonably good. That should be able to supply at least the ground troops. Industrial zone is ready. Good. And we should look at more production. Oh, well, hey, Jaeger, if no one broke the law, we wouldn't need the police either. You know, nations aren't good. We had the Soviet Union, which was one of the most evil countries, at least in, you know, since the 18th century, on the Security Council. We have the, you know, the People's Republic of China on the Security Council, and there have been even more evil than the Soviet Union, and have at least millions, at least 1 million plus, probably 2 million plus, people in concentration camps right now. And they're probably the nation that's executing the most of their citizens. So we have these people, these nations, and you know, yeah, we can talk about good UN laws, but they learned their lesson. The day the Soviets protested for something, I forget exactly what it was, protested something, so they boycotted a UN Security Council meeting. That was the day the Security Council approved intervening in the Korean War. The Soviet Union from that day, and Russia to this day, because they took over the seat from the Soviet Union, has never missed a Security Council meeting, because they're not going to let that happen again. And so, yeah, but Security Council is part of the rules of the UN. You know, that's why we think it, you know, is worthless. And it's also worthless that a lot of these countries have votes. And yes, I'm looking at countries, and I'm not talking about their colors of their freaking skin. I'm talking about the corrupt governments that they are. And they have votes on it that are equal to the United States. The Soviet Union had 3 votes in the General Assembly. The U.S. only had 1, because the Soviet Union represented more than one country. And the U.S., well, it only represented one country. But of course it doesn't. The U.S. represented 50 countries and the territory of Puerto Rico and Guam and whatnot. But so they should have had 50 votes. If we were to give in the General Assembly, the U.S. get its 50 votes. Just think how that would change the makeup of the General Assembly. 50 more nations, because we are 50 states, not 50 provinces, 50 states. Austria is a state, Germany is a state, France is a state. Those are all states. Britain could sort of claim Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, as well as Britain, and get more seats on the General Assembly. I'm not talking the Security Council, but the General Assembly. And of course, I don't know if Russia has only 1, or if the Russian Federation still has 3. I just don't know. But I know the Soviet Union had 3 General Assembly seats representing the various unions or various nations within the Soviet Union. So yeah, from its beginning, from its inception, it is, in my opinion, been a very bad thing. And they should have never let the Soviets on it. Should have never let the Soviets on it. Be a member in it, yes. Never let them on the Security Council. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. or let them on, but not, because to the best of my knowledge, there's normally 3 seats on the Security Council that aren't, permanent members, and they don't have a veto. So just give the Soviet Union a non-permanent seat, but make it permanent, No, I'm disagreeing with that. Jaeger is saying, but it doesn't change the fact that the concept of the UN is better than nothing. Well, see, the problem is, if you want peace, you need to prepare for war. And so if you think you have a League of Nations or a UN or some sort of deliberative body that is going to effectively intervene when there's an unjust war, whatever the hell that is, but that's going to intervene in the war. And we've seen time and time again, even when you have, Japan operating in the against China, and the League of Nations condemns it, they don't join militarily in its opposition. Now, there was no Security Council for the League of Nations, as far as I know. I'm not an expert on the details of the structure of the League of Nations, but I don't know of any security type council or special council. It was a General Assembly that every nation had a vote in, if I'm not mistaken, which the U.S. never joined, although we proposed and pushed for the League of Nations and wanted it and founded it, but the U.S. Senate would not ratify the League of Nations charter in the U.S., so we never joined the League of Nations. But so when Japan was doing its bad behavior in China, it leaves the League of Nations, and the League of Nations does nothing about it. When Italy attacks Abyssinia or Ethiopia, however you want to say it, condemns it, puts on it. They actually do something. They put a League of Nations blockade against everything going into any trade with Italy, except oil, except the one thing that would actually affect Italy, which is they could trade any. They couldn't trade any League of Nations member couldn't trade with Italy, except for an oil, and so they don't intervene to help Ethiopia out. And when the Soviet Union invades Finland, the League of Nations does anything but condemn it, and the Soviet Union leaves the League of Nations. So these nations, China, Ethiopia, Finland, are all member nations and get no military aid. None of those nations come to their protection. And so we can see time and time again, even in the General Assembly, they very well almost never vote to intervene in an active war. So it deludes nations or the member, people of the nations into thinking that, well, if some nation does something stupid, well, the UN or the League of Nations is going to do something about it. We can rely upon their aid and protection, just like the peoples of the Ukraine can rely upon the United States of America, because we signed a treaty with the Ukrainian government that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, the U.S. will protect the territorial integrity of the Ukraine from any invasion. So they were safe to give up their nuclear weapons, and Russia's taken Crimea. So we know clearly that it was a stupid move for Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons. And so that's even a one-on-one treaty with the U.S. that the U.S. under Obama did not honor. We broke that treaty. And so this is why I am not saying there shouldn't exist the UN, but it gives a false hope to nations. And That's very much how I see it. And then I also see bad things that the UN does. Like when they invaded Katanga. They invaded a breakaway state from, the Republic of Congo. And so they send Swedish troops to go and fight Katanganese gendarmerie. Katanga is... No, wrong continent. Katanga is down here. Elizabethville, this area is Katanga. Maybe not. Yeah, these two provinces is basically Katanga. It broke away. And so UN, and they come in with blue helmets on. This wasn't a peacekeeping mission. This was an active military aggression. And I know people who, well, I met people, don't really know them, but I met people who fought the UN and lost. So yeah, and they weren't even like in Korea, in which it wasn't a, they weren't wearing blue helmets in there. These were guys with the UN on their things, the Swedish troops. So yeah, I'm not, as you can tell, fairly in favor of that. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have your opinion. It's your opinion, and you're very welcome to it, and you may be right. I just don't think so. See, I'm not a leftist who can't deal with people who disagree with them. Well, the U.S. didn't under Obama. Now, I don't know if that's Obama's fault or whether that's our State Department's fault or whatnot. Yeah. And so I just, and I get your idea of concept. Now, I also, the other thing is a single unified world government that is going to do something like the Katanga situation, in that Katanga breaks away and enforces, a civil war. And part of what really does push UN involvement in Katanga is that Katanga hires a bunch of, there's French mercenaries, Belgian mercenaries, South African Anglo mercenaries. There's three main mercenary groups. They're sort of fighting down in there. So they hire European-based people. And Katanga's, of course, winning the war. And they want to stop that precedent of hiring that. There was a very, very legitimate local government that broke away. And I think outlawing war is a terrible thing. So I guess fundamentally we disagree here. War should not be a crime. War should not be a crime. There are war crimes, yes, but war itself should not be a crime. I fundamentally disagree with the idea that military activity in and of itself is a criminal activity, and that those who want to follow that profession are somehow supporting criminal activity in any way, shape, or form. No, that doesn't mean I support any aggressive action, by nation. Just because they want to, that doesn't. Just because Germany wants to invade some country doesn't mean that it's all right to do so. It just means that, and that can be a specific crime. But that doesn't mean that war itself is outlawed or a crime. I don't think so. I don't think that should be at all. Keep moving. Well, these guys are, these guys here. And so, like, I totally agree that going after some of the Nazi leadership for their aggressive war as a crime. But those are specific circumstances. And that's why we have casus belli. In games like Hearts of Iron or EU, it depends on the cause for the war. If there's a reasonable cause for the war, then wars are perfectly legitimate. Okay, well, okay, you say defensive wars are allowed. The use of violence in any political affair is outlawed. I totally disagree, because politics is violent, is warfare by other means, and warfare is politics by other means. Okay, let's just say we have a dispute on a border. And it could be a dispute. Let's say, where's the border here? Who owns the North Sea? Britain says it does, and let's say the Netherlands say they do. They're going to fight it out. There's a conflict between these two nations on where is the border for the North Sea between these two nations. Of course, Norway and Denmark could jump in, and even Germany or something. Maybe does Belgium claim that this bit of channel here means that it can access the North Sea. But let's say, who gets to own the North Sea? Have a war over it if you can't, obviously I'm not saying you should go to war over it, but if you can't settle it through diplomatic reasons, it doesn't mean that the war between the Netherlands and Britain is unjust. It is a conflict between two nations, okay? It is not an aggressive war, nor is it a defensive war. It could be, say, I don't know, where the border of Hungary is versus currently and where it should be. Should this part of Romania today be part of Hungary? And there could be a real dispute over that. I'm not saying that this shouldn't be part of Romania today, but we could also look, this strip of land here that's in, I don't know that anybody recognizes the nation of whatever it's called here. It's between Ukraine and between Romania, and is sort of a puppet of Russia, if I'm not mistaken, the political situation right here. And so this is a disputed territorial situation, maybe with Romania. Whether it's with the Ukraine or whether it's with these local peoples, there's a casus belli. And so Romania may just go, nope, it's ours, we're invading it, because we have this historical claim to it. And so they go in and invade it. And if we all go, yeah, they sort of kind of do, okay, they get to invade, But if we look at it, it's just like, oh, well, we want to own Bulgaria tomorrow and invade there and just have aggressive wars for aggressive wars' sake. That's a different matter entirely, in my opinion. And so, I'm not saying you're a bad person or like any liberal thing. We just disagree, and that's fine. I'm not attacking you, Jaeger. Please don't take it as such. I'm just disagreeing with your idea that only defensive wars are justifiable or legal or whatever you want to label them. Oh, God, yeah. No, to my understanding, and longtime viewers will know this about me. I'm a culturalist. I try to understand large groups of people by their culture. Individuals are individuals, but large groups of people. And there are different cultures, and I have no good understanding, meaning I've never visited, talked to, known, but known people, in depth, anybody from the different parts of Africa, but within the African tribal groupings, however you want to call that, different ethnic groups within the black Africans I'm talking about, there are different cultural bases. And again, it is colored by my readings and dealing, literally some personal dealings, sort of shaking hands and said hi and talked to a few people, not like I'm really buddies with them. I'm not trying to go down that road. And then as well as reading about people that they've known and whatever. I understand the Igbos that tried to break away from Nigeria down here in the Biafra War are culturally rather different and more industrious than other parts of Nigeria. The Katanganese were culturally different than the sort of tribal bases, and again, a bit more I don't want to, and I don't, a bit more industrious is what I want to say, a bit more taking to doing modern industry. Yeah, okay, good. I just, because periodically, Jaeger, I bump into people on the internet who because they have a different agreement, either think I must think that they're a bad person, or they think I'm a bad person, and I don't think that about you. We just um, uh, think, well, yeah, I get your idea of human family concept, but it doesn't seem to be in human nature. We seem to be a species that throughout our history um, is a conflict and aggressive species. And that is the nature of man. And I don't think you can fundamentally change the nature of man. I could be wrong. I've watched a lot of Star Trek who believes that, you know, they put forward in the show that we can change the fundamental nature of man. I just don't believe we can. I think that is why I think ideas like communism are evil, because they believe that they can fundamentally change the nature of man, make a more progressive man. And because they're pushing this ideology and are using force, you know, massive death camps, massive killings, you know, however many, you know, 100 million people died in the 20th century because of communism. I think trying to do something that is unattainable and killing 100 million people, I think, is at its fundamental heart evil. So that is why I see communism as evil at its fundamental heart, even while it's trying to spout that it's doing good. But the good that it's trying to do is something that is utopianist. By definition, utopianism is something that is unreal, unachievable, impractical, isn't going to happen. So sure, it would be nice if the nature of man changes and we become a peaceful species. But we haven't yet, and I have yet to see any evidence of it in history. And so if I start seeing evidence of it, I will cheer it on, but I don't see any evidence of it. And so, yeah. And so, yeah, we have a disagreement. That's fine. And so, yeah, with Africa and situations, and again, I've read some books, watched documentaries, met a few people, listened to some lectures by some of the people that have been active around this part of the world and the conflicts. And supposedly there's significant differences between the regional cultural African groups here. And I can't really, in any real intelligent way, I'm sort of using industrious as sort of the overall view, and I don't want to make it that they don't necessarily appear like more advanced or anything like that. I'm not putting it, but just more okay, here's how I guess I would describe it: more readily to naturally do the maintenance work to keep modern industrial endeavors going. Does that seem fair? You know, as opposed to having outsiders do it. Some groups seem more willing to take to doing it. Well, I know how the best way is to make mankind not to destroy itself is for us to find an enemy that isn't mankind. You know, space aliens or something. Then we'll do great. Yes, I totally agree with IKB there. That would be a uniting factor. Okay, well, we're going to end this episode here, not to live stream everybody out there on YouTube land, but those watching later on YouTube, we're going to be ending this now. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Please post your comments on any of the topics mentioned today or something else relevant. Love to hear from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.